Right, welcome everybody to our industry update this month. I'm Jill Cox, now with Chicago Title. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we are super excited to have our annual visit with Marcia Waters, Director of the Division of Real Estate. She doesn't really need much more of an introduction than that. You all know who she is, and we always appreciate you, Marcia, and your time and your insight into our current happenings in real estate and the market and what's going on with brokers. And we thank you so much for your time today and for your update. So, of course, Damien is here with us as well. He always likes to chime in. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Marcia. Thank you so much again for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. So I'm just going to give an overview of really kind of focusing on the Real Estate Commission's program. Hopefully this is good news. We don't have much planned for the industry. We're trying to keep things kind of quiet. We have a sunset review going on of the Real Estate Commission, and the Division of Real Estate is included in that. So that is kind of a heavy lift when they do these reviews. We're not actually the ones that do the reviews themselves, but we have to supply all the data and then answer questions, provide recommendations about program changes. So we've already done kind of all of the data compilation for the sunset analyst. And now it's just a matter of kind of answering questions that he has about the program as he looks at the statutes and kind of deals with the different suggestions that he gets from industry participants and also consumers. I will say that there's about 9 different criteria that are evaluated during a sunset review process. The big question that they're trying to answer is whether regulation should continue of the real estate industry, particularly the real estate brokers. I will fall out of my chair if the recommendation is that the industry can regulate itself. I think on a regular basis at the commission meetings, we demonstrate why real estate brokers are regulated. And then we've had a lot of kind of high profile cases that we've done press releases on here recently that further demonstrate why real estate brokers are regulated. But aside from answering the question of whether real estate brokers should be licensed or not, they also look at whether our regulations are timely. Do they need updating? Colorado is a regulation light state. So when they look at a sunset review, they are trying to determine if we are regulating the industry at the lowest threshold necessary to protect consumers, but also not be impeding or a barrier to entry for practitioners. So that is kind of a sunset review in the nutshell. What will happen is by October 15th, that's the statutory deadline, they will produce a report about the sunset review with the recommendations that are made. This is done by the Colorado Office of Policy Research and Regulatory Reform. The acronym is COPPER. It is located within the Executive Director's Office of DORA, but it's separate from the division. So the recommendations come out are not what the Division of Real Estate necessarily wants. It's what the department thinks should happen. And then next year, if the goal is to move forward with regulation, continuing the regulation, then they will run legislation to continue the program. It will be presented to a committee. The committee will consider the recommendations, and the committee itself can actually change the recommendations if they want to. So they can start severing recommendations or adding recommendations. But it's basically a 2-year-long process. And we'll just see what happens. I really don't anticipate that they're going to say that real estate brokers don't need to be regulated anymore. And then they will look at the division to see if there's any changes that need to be made to the Division of Real Estate and whether it needs to continue to exist. We do have 2 other regulatory programs within it, along with the HOA office. So I'm anxious to see what the recommendations are come October. If you are interested in providing feedback about the sunset review or providing suggestions about changes, you can do so. The policy analyst name is Saheb Singh, and I'm going to give you his email address. So it's sahib.singh@state.co.us. And you can provide him with any comments that you have about the real estate broker regulatory program and the Real Estate Commission. Past sunset reviews have resulted in changes in the composition of the Real Estate Commission. There have been clarifications to the law. like standard forms is one of the things that they clarify. There was also some clarifying language when it comes to paying referral fees and compliance with RESPA. So that's what's come about from prior sunset reviews. I do know that one segment of the industry has submitted a request that there be a separate credential for property managers. We'll see kind of how that shakes out. That was actually included in a prior sunset review that was done in, I think, 2018. But there was some dissent between the residential property managers and the commercial property managers, and it was actually, that recommendation was stripped from the bill when it was in committee. So we'll see what happens with that. Damien, were you going to say something?
I was going to see if we could get the email address into the chat, but I can't figure out how to do it. Apparently, I'm not smart enough to do the actual technology stuff, Marcia. So I know it surprises you, so stop laughing at me, but just so that we could give it out to everybody.
Try it now. Zoom always likes to change its settings on me every single time, so now you should
Oh,
be
I
able
can do it to everyone. Okay, so you mind giving it to, oh, she just did it. Okay, thank you. Marcia does technology. I do not, apparently. So
fulfilling my role as backup IT person these days. So that's the sunset review. Also, if you're aware of consumers that would like to provide feedback about interactions they've had, particularly with real estate brokers, the consumers are the most underrepresented group of participants in a sunset review. So please, if you know of anybody that kind of fits the bill of just being a basic consumer, it would be great to have their feedback incorporated as well. So the other things that we are working on are just updating the commission approved forms. The ones that we are looking at this year are the manufactured home contract, the seller's property disclosure, the listing contracts, the closing instructions, the post-closing occupancy agreement, and the agreement to revive. There was a bill that was going to be kind of similar to radon. It was a mold disclosure bill, and I don't think that passed. We're kind of waiting for the dust to settle. The legislative session has concluded, but we're waiting to see what the governor signs into law. And then we will be sending out an update about any new bills affecting the real estate industry. But I don't think the mold disclosure bill survived the legislature. Other than that, like, there won't be any new disclosure forms as a result of legislation. There were a couple pieces of legislation that we had kind of flagged to see if they would have an impact on the real estate commission forms. And so we will start working through those here probably in the next couple weeks. The forms process has changed a little bit. I think it will give us a little more flexibility as far as deadlines are concerned. And with the change, I anticipate that we will do the non-rulemaking hearing for the forms in August rather than in June. But we will still get those out to the educators in October, and then they will go into effect January 1st of 2026. And then the other thing that we have that's a policy matter is addressing a little bit of a disconnect between some rules that we had on the books and statutes regarding real estate broker supervision and the sharing of confidential information with the employing brokers. This was discussed at the April commission meeting. The Attorney General's office had given the Real Estate Commission some proposed language about how to address the issue in rule. They gave them 3 options. The Real Estate Commission picked one, and that is what we will start working on. It will not be going to the Real Estate Commission in June for a rulemaking hearing. We've got other stuff going on, but it may come about probably in August or October. And that is really kind of policy-wise what the Real Estate Commission is dealing with. I will tell you that we have some rulemaking that will happen with the Board of Mortgage Loan Originators. They want to revise the tangible net benefit disclosures so that those will really just focus on refinance transactions, not actual purchase transactions. It's the board's opinion that if you're purchasing a house, that's your tangible net benefit from that transaction. So we're taking draft rules to them here in a couple weeks at their May meeting, along with just some modifications to their existing disclosure form. And I don't expect any rule changes for the Board of Real Estate Appraisers at this point. With the HOA Information and Resource Center, it was subject to sunset review last year, so they ran the bill this year. There hasn't been any changes to that program. The only change of note that was made to the sunset bill is they shortened the review period. It was originally, I think, 13 years, and now it's down to 5. So there's nothing really that we have to implement with that. It will just continue on as it has been doing. And then there was another piece of legislation, and I don't remember the bill number off the top of my head, that's going to require the division to provide consumer information about credit counseling and the foreclosure process as it applies to HOAs. That was passed. It hasn't been signed by the governor yet, but we anticipate that it will be. So you will see, if it gets signed, we will be providing that additional information for consumers too. On to, I think, everybody's favorite topic, common complaint issues. So we have been getting a lot of complaints that pertain to property management, but not the stuff that the Real Estate Commission has jurisdiction over. So we get a lot of complaints about property maintenance issues. If there's a security deposit dispute, that's not going to be the Real Estate Commission. The Real Estate Commission has jurisdiction when the security deposits are mismanaged or not timely returned. But for the tenants that want to argue with their landlord about, how dare you keep my security deposit due to damage that I did to the property, that is not something that falls within the jurisdiction of the Real Estate Commission. I will flag for you guys that there have been a couple property management complaints that we've seen over the past year that would fall under the gamut of unworthy and incompetent practice and has set people in the crosshairs of the Real Estate Commission. And then there's a housing protection unit over in the Attorney General's office that we will refer cases to, and they've got similar yet different jurisdiction over these issues. We've had a couple real estate brokers that have charged application fees that are exorbitant. There was a law passed a few years ago that basically says an application fee can only be charged for the actual work performed. In one case, we had a real estate broker charge $1,300 for an application fee. I don't know what work they're performing at that cost, but the Real Estate Commission took issue with that. It was also kind of interesting because it was posed as an application fee on the front end. The tenant never ended up signing a lease, and then the broker turned around and claimed that it was a security deposit that was kept. You can try to change the terminology all you want. If there's no lease, then I don't know how you have a security deposit. And then we look at the fact that you charged a $1,300 application fee. So with that type of fact pattern, that broker was disciplined. Those are the types of cases that we will refer over the Housing Protection Unit at the Attorney General's office, and they can look at them from a different lens. Issues as far as, like, I moved into a property, the back door doesn't
Marcia,
work, my stove is
I was
broken.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, I was just curious. Do they take those up? Have you seen them actually prosecute on those cases?
I don't know that they've prosecuted it yet. We met with the AG's office just to see how our jurisdiction may overlap with theirs. And when we described that scenario, they specifically asked that we refer it over to them. So it remains to be seen what they will do. That's kind of an unknown that if I was a practitioner, I would not want to be like their first test case on.
Or to be on their radar at all.
Yeah. So keep that in mind. With the other issues that we get, the complaints that we get about property management that don't fall within the commission's jurisdiction, we are typically trying to point consumers to alternative resources available to them. A lot of the time it's going to be, they're going to have to contact an attorney. We will point them over to the Colorado Bar's website. The problem with a lot of tenants is most of the time they can't afford to hire an attorney. So we are also kind of trying to educate them on pro bono work. But the other issues that we're seeing, we continue to see issues with lockbox violations. And just for those that are not familiar, this is when basically, as a real estate broker, you may be representing the buyer and they want to go see a property and you decide you're not going to accompany them. And you don't send another broker or your assistant out to accompany them. You just give them the lockbox and send them on their way. That is a license law violation. It's an actual rule violation. It happens quite a bit. A lot of people have Ring videos, so we actually have a lot of video evidence to support the complaints that are filed with us, which is awesome. And I will tell you, pretty much first time out of the gate, when we see one of those violations, it's probably going to end up in a $500 fine. The real estate commission doesn't have a whole lot of patience for people who engage in the same behavior over and over again. So when they see the same violations happen repeatedly, they will ratchet up the discipline. I haven't seen too many repeat offenders with lockbox violations, but I do know that the real estate commission is getting really frustrated about it. They had asked us to do an additional newsletter article. We've done multiple on lockbox violations. So they're probably going to go down the road of increasing the discipline if this continues. There's nothing that binds them to the first offense is $500. I would keep in mind that they have an array of tools that they can use, and the maximum fine per violation that they can impose is $2,500. So just keep that in. If this continues, they can decide that first violations are going to get higher fines than $500. I think $500 is kind of, that would be a painful check to write to the real estate commission for that type of mistake. So please, if you're inclined to not want to go out with your buyer to see a property, find another licensee that's willing to do it, or an assistant, or God forbid you make time, given that they hired you to help them through this whole process. Disclosure of material facts continues to be a regular complaint that we get. When in doubt, disclose, but you are required by law to disclose all known material facts. And if you have a seller that says, yeah, I really don't want you to disclose that I had a mold issue or that my property was used to manufacture meth, that is probably a good time to run away and not represent that seller. They're not setting you up for success with complying with the law. You have to disclose those issues. And if you have a property that goes under contract and there's an inspection done and there's issues identified, then you are going to have to disclose those additional issues that you become aware of. So please make sure that you're doing those disclosures. We've had some interesting failures to disclose cases over the years. Brokers that engage in fix and flips that don't disclose material facts, the real estate commission doesn't seem to have a lot of patience for them as well. One of my favorite recent cases was a property out of Boulder where the broker purchased it to do a fix and flip, and it had a raccoon infestation problem, which, working at the Division of Real Estate now makes me worry about things that I never knew could be possible. So now I have to worry about a raccoon infestation problem in my own home. Or squirrels is another one, but there were raccoons getting into this property and actually dying inside the walls. So you have the stench of decomposing animal that at some point they had gotten the property down to kind of the drywall. They'd stuck air fresheners, the type that the paper tree air fresheners that you use in your car. They had stuck a bunch of those in the walls, hoping to mask the smell of decomposing animal. The property is purchased. The new buyers magically knocked a hole in the wall right where all of the air fresheners were hung, and they start noticing all these different issues. That was a case that went to the real estate commission. I don't think that the real estate commission was very forgiving when they rendered discipline in that case. So they do make a distinction between when you fail to disclose an issue when somebody else owns the property versus when you fail to disclose an issue on the property that you own. Yes,
I was just going to say real quick, Marcia, that commission position 27 that the Attorney General put together, is helpful for brokers to give to their clients when they're questioning whether they need to disclose something, that even though it doesn't specifically reference what a seller's obligation is, it talks about the broker's obligation, which pretty much mirror each other in that contract, which I have found to be very helpful when the seller says, well, I shouldn't have to disclose this. Well, here's what the Attorney General says. Tell me what you think now. But just my 2 cents.
It is amazing how many cases we have where there has been some sort of sewer issue or other repair that has been done to the property that the seller doesn't disclose. And then when the buyer moves in and starts having issues with that same component, they are hiring the exact same company to fix the issue. And then that
every time
is a wealth of information about, oh yeah, we've been out here, 5 times in the last 3 years. And so we do get a lot of complaints, and part of our job is to decipher whether this was a failure to disclose on the seller's part versus the broker's part, because if it was on the seller's part, we don't have any jurisdiction unless that seller has a broker's license. We saw our first land fraud transaction within the last couple of years. And the broker was based out of Denver. I don't have all the details, so I'm going to give you like a 10,000-foot view of some of the fact pattern. But the broker was based out of the Denver area. The seller was like a 92-year-old man, also based out of Denver, but the property was a parcel of land in southeastern Colorado. The broker was contacted by somebody purporting to be the seller or the owner of the property, but there were several flags that the broker should have caught on to, like he couldn't spell his own name. The names were reversed. And this isn't an issue where you have somebody that's got like two first names. This was like me suddenly calling myself Waters as my first name and Marcia as my last name. So, and then he's reversing the names on the contract documents. He really couldn't give the broker any description about the property. He had no photographs of the property. Everything was kind of pushed on the broker as far as you're going to have to follow up about these property details. Also, what was unique is you've got a Denver-based seller, but they had to use a notary out of Georgia for the transaction. Ultimately, it wasn't the listing broker that caught on to the fact that they were dealing with a fraudulent seller. It was the buyer's agent, and also the actual seller's daughter started doing some estate planning and had found out that the property had exchanged hands. They fortunately were able to get a hold of law enforcement and nobody lost any money, which is kind of unique. But the buyer's broker had also picked up on several of the red flags and brought that to the attention. The concern was, though, during this investigation, when our investigator interviewed the listing broker, he had told the investigator, well, I have done 400 to 500 transactions where I have, most of the time I have not met the seller. I've only met the seller less than a handful of times. That is really concerning because I don't know how many times he may have been representing somebody that was purporting to be the seller and they actually weren't. That will kind of remain to be seen, I guess, with future complaints, but that is not a good business practice. I would encourage you guys that anytime you see something that looks just kind of amiss, start asking questions. Particularly, like, we also have had some complaints where we've got a couple, the relationship has dissolved. One person lists the property, the other person is not included on the listing contract. You need to start asking questions about that, like where are they? Because you're going to need both of them in order to sell that property. But I think it comes up fairly regularly where you really need to start asking questions, and you should not feel bad about asking questions. If they get angry with you over asking those questions, I think that should be a red flag in and of itself, kind of like the seller that doesn't want you to disclose issues with the property. I would also caution you guys, I understand, like, given that the interest rates on loans have been higher the past couple of years and financing options, as a result, you may encounter more assumptions or seller finances. You need to stay in your own lane. You have a license to practice real estate brokerage. You do not have a license to conduct mortgage brokerage. So if they are asking you to help with a seller finance transaction, your license doesn't enable you to do that. You are setting yourself up for failure if you're doing it without a mortgage loan originator's license. So when they start talking about doing seller finance transactions, they either need to contact a mortgage loan originator, which most mortgage loan originators don't want to do a seller finance transaction. And in that case, then you need to refer them over to an attorney to help them. There are a lot of federal disclosures that come into play. And if you assist with a seller finance transaction and you are not appropriately licensed, the real estate commission can deem you to be unworthy and incompetent. And then depending on what you were doing, that may result in a referral over to the Board of Mortgage Loan Originators, who may go after you for unlicensed practice. Or if you do a really bang up job and it looks like you were engaging in the practice of law, we will refer you over to the Supreme Court, an attorney regulation for practicing law without a license. Same thing goes as like, you have a limited license to practice law, and that is to complete the commission approved contracts. You don't get to draft your own contracts. You don't get to provide legal advice the way an attorney would. So be really careful and make sure that you're staying in your lane, because I know that the Supreme Court relies on the Real Estate Commission to deal with brokers that step outside of bounds of their license, but we will still refer you over to the Supreme Court if it looks like you are practicing law without a license. And then just also brokerage relationships. Over the past couple of years, we've seen, the example that I'm going to give you are divorce cases. If I was out practicing, I don't think that I would specialize in dealing with divorce situations. Those don't ever seem to work out amicably, and it usually seems to result in a complaint to the Real Estate Commission. If that is the area that you want to practice in, the important thing to consider is that you need to treat both of those parties equally, and you are performing the brokerage relationship duties for both of them, not just the one that's nice, and you shirk the duties on the one that is difficult, because we see that time and time again where both parties are not being kept apprised of what is going on with the transaction. It appears that the broker is favoring one party over the other, and that can set you up for failure with the Real Estate Commission. They can basically determine that how you manage that transaction, you are not fulfilling your brokerage duties, and you can be disciplined for that. And the last thing I have for you guys doesn't really fall within our jurisdiction, but we get complaints about it. And I would ask you just to be mindful of how you use social media, particularly expressing social or political opinions. I think it was in February of this year, somebody decided to shave an Adolf Hitler mustache onto their face. It was a man. It would be a different issue if it was able to grow facial hair, but they kind of had a similar Adolf Hitler haircut. They shaved the Hitler mustache on, posted on social media something about their political views, and compliments of their Facebook account. You could tell that they were a real estate broker. We don't have jurisdiction over that. It was probably in poor taste what he chose to do. Like I said, we don't have jurisdiction. We get a lot of those complaints, though, about how you use social media. If you're using it for your real estate business, we do have jurisdiction over that. But if you're voicing your own opinions on social matters or political issues, you have a constitutional right to free speech. It doesn't fall within our jurisdiction. However, if you're a member of the Realtor Association, that may run afoul of their code of ethics. So keep that in mind. But just to spare us the agony of having to deal with these complaints that come in, and also having to explain to consumers why we don't have jurisdiction over that, please just be mindful of what you post on social media. The other thing that I have for you is the clear cooperation agreements through the MLS. We don't have jurisdiction over those. So if somebody is advertising something is coming soon in the MLS and it doesn't comply with the timeline restrictions of the MLS, you need to complain to the MLS, not us. It's not our jurisdiction. The last thing I have for you guys is just kind of an update on the population numbers. So these are as of April. I'm going to give you April of 2025 and a look back of April of 2024, just so that you can see how the populations have changed. And I'm going to start off with the real estate brokers. So as of April 2025, we have 49,393 licensed real estate brokers in the state of Colorado. A year prior, we had 51,321. So we've lost about 2,000. We have 305 active complaints against the real estate brokers. We have seen an uptick. It looks like we saw kind of a big push of complaints coming in between February and March of this year. So we do have kind of higher complaint volumes right now. The next population that I have for you guys are the appraisers. As of April 2025, we have 2,835 of them. A year prior, we had 2,905, so we've lost 70 appraisers over the course of a year. We have 15 active complaints against them. And then with the mortgage loan originators, as of last month, we had 18,016 of them. A year prior, we had 17,453, and we have 25 active complaints. We've seen some contraction in the MLO numbers, largely due to interest rates. You just don't have the new loan activity or the refinance activity. However, with the rates going down and changing, I expect that you will start to see more of them coming back. With our different license types, mortgage loan originators probably have the easiest license portability nationally. Colorado has accepted that, you know, if you pass that uniform state test, it's easy entry. A lot of mortgage loan originators are credentialed in a lot of different jurisdictions. So I expect that when the interest rates drop, when that happens, I heard the other day that it could be in December, but I expect that you'll start to see their numbers creep up once refinances and new purchases become a little more attractive. And that's it.
Wow, that was fast and furious.
Practicing to be an auctioneer when I'm not doing IT stuff.
I'm just glad to hear that you're expanding your role as the division director into IT. That's fantastic.
It's been fun.
Jill, we can't hear you.
You can't hear me at all?
Now we can.
Oh, now you can. Okay. If anybody has any questions, drop those into Q&A and
I have a quick one while we're waiting, Marcia. Have you guys started increasing your audits across brokerage firms and everything, or are those pretty much the same numbers as before? It just seems like I've seen a lot more activity this year than I've seen in past years.
So we've hired 2 additional examiners, and we kind of evaluated their production rates. So you should be seeing a slight uptick. Plus, the department has its own metrics for different things, and they want to see us completing more audits than we have previously.
That makes sense. I noticed.
The primary focus is on property management because that is the area of greatest risk. Although they do a variety, they also do sales files audits and then broker-owned properties. But the consumer concern is with property management.
Okay.
I don't think a lot of sales brokers, due to the issues with three-way reconciliations and everything else, I don't think most sales brokers want to have their own trust accounts to hold other people's funds. They rely on the title companies for that.
Yeah, it's changed dramatically since you and I first got into this business, but I'm dating you too now, so there you go. But
it's 20 years that I've been with the division in August, so
I'm aware. We came in together.
seems like an eternity, but it has also flown by.
So, but yeah, it's definitely changed. But like I said, I just noticed that there's a lot more activity in that area than I've seen in the past. So that makes sense if the metrics has changed.
Yeah.
Well, we don't seem to have any other questions. Damien, do you have any other questions?
Nope, that's all I got.
No? Okay. All right. Well, Marcia, thank you so much as always for your time and expertise. You always have interesting stories to share, and we always love having you on. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, everyone, well, have a good rest of your week. Marcia, thanks again, and we will look forward to seeing you on our industry update next month. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.